Welcome to the Blue Dog Whisperer. I have a returning guest, congressional candidate from South Jersey's 2nd District, Tim Alexander, who is on. Tim, thank you so much for coming back. It's great to have you.
It's my pleasure, and I'm happy to join you today.
Absolutely. So, you ran for Congress in this district in 2024. Back then, we had a different president with a different party in control of the Senate, and now everything is in Republican control. So I want to know because Jeff Van Drew, since his party switch, he served under Trump during his first term, but Democrats still had control of the House. This is the first time Jeff Van Drew has been a Republican, where the Republican Party has complete control of everything, including the White House. So how do you think that changes the game in your case?
Well, overall, Jeff's attachment and association with the current president, I see it as a tremendous negative for him. I think it becomes a greater negative each day because of the, let's say, antics and shenanigans of the president. And I think that Jeff is on that sinking ship with the rest of the GOP because they're afraid to speak up, to have leadership and push back. So, ironically, we are running on leadership being the solution. And our vision for the district in America is to rebuild and rebrand. And that's what we have to work on day one. Whether we take back control, which I'm very confident we will, of the House. Eventually, we'll get the Senate, and and hopefully in 2028 we take the White House, and then we have to work to rebuild and rebrand the United States worldwide reputation.
So when you first ran against Jeff Van Drew, it was 2021, and the campaign was obviously in 2022. I think there was some frustration with Biden, and I think that a lot of voters in your district who did vote for Biden, although your district always voted for Trump, there was some buyer's remorse, and I think a lot of people. I remember after Afghanistan, people kind of started going off of the Biden bandwagon if there was one. Do you think your district, especially the Trump voters, feel like they've gotten what they paid for? And if not, what do you bring to the table for them?
So the overall, uh, what we hear, let me rephrase that. What we hear most is that they were voting for Trump in the previous election because they thought that he was going to bring about immigration crackdown, reform, economic stability, if not growth, and that they disadmire some of his policies. Um, those policies were left at the door when Donald Trump entered the office. His immigration reform has become an immigration brutality. And he had an opportunity, the country had an opportunity to have meaningful reform. And he put the kibosh to it through his network and the GOP when Biden was in office. Ironically, he hasn't reinitiated that. He hasn't brought it back to say, okay, now I could take credit for this, because he didn't want Biden to get credit for the immigration plan, bipartisan, by the way, drafted by a Republican member. So the the thing we hear the most is, I voted for this guy, but I didn't vote for this. I didn't vote for what he's doing nationwide. I didn't vote for the outrageous deficit. I didn't vote for him taking all these immigrants at a cost of 120 some $billion a year. Again, increasing the deficit. I certainly didn't vote for the loss of my SNAP benefits or my Medicaid access, and eventually my Medicare. I didn't vote for the harm that it's going to do to Social Security just on the surface with respect to taking all these immigrants out of the country. We lose $38 billion in contributions that from people who could never collect. So it was money going into a much needed fund that we would never be able to recover, and we wouldn't have otherwise, and that at a cost of about 128, $130 billion to keep them imprisoned, not to mention the transportation costs to foreign countries. And it's just cruel and evil that you come from one country and you get shipped to another country. And then when you listen to the El Salvadorian president, who says no one gets out of our prison, Once you're in, you stay in. Well, these people are supposed to be detained until their hearing. And what this foreign entity is telling Americans is that we don't care about your justice system. They're going to stay in our prison until they die, with some exceptions of prisoner swaps and so forth. So it's really what we hear the most from all people, whether they're Republican or Democrat, is that who voted for this? I certainly didn't. Now there's some who did, some who love what his policies are, but I think that they're misguided and they're misplaced. And our door is open to everybody. And what we want to do, I can't be like my current opponent, a representative just for one party. I am there and will be there to serve everyone. Democrats, Republicans, MAGA, independents, whatever you are, if you have something that we can work on, if you have a good idea that would benefit the entire district, I'm all for it.
Well, even though President Trump's immigration policies, as far as deporting people to countries that they have never been to, I don't believe President Trump's deportation numbers have matched the Obama era. And what I said when Trump was running for reelection last year is that he had 2 years to build the border wall with the Republican Congress and the Republican Senate, and he chose not to because he wanted that issue to run on. And he himself has been fined for hiring people here illegally. And now you have, and I said that Trump was never going to get too serious about illegal immigration because those guys are paying taxes that the wealthy, like Donald Trump, don't have to pay. The wealthy love the illegal immigration system.
Well, you said a lot there, so let's unpack the comparison to the Obama numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Obama afforded people due process, and then he sent them back to their home country.
Mm-hmm.
So the efficiency of doing that may have created a record number of deportations, but there's no president in modern history who has a record of deporting people to foreign countries without due process. We are a country, a nation of laws. We built our country on the Constitution of the United States, and it is being flagrantly disregarded. And so I don't think there's a fair comparison about per se numbers, but what they actually represent. So, and I believe you also touched on who benefits from the illegal immigration. I think that it's fair to say that business owners, restaurants, farmers certainly benefited from illegal workers, but they also had quite a few legalized workers, people on temporary agricultural visas, and the people who follow the seasons around the world, at least the North and South American portions of it. So the reality here is, yes, there's some people who benefited from it, some people who otherwise would support Donald Trump. And I think recently there was a particular group who went to him. I believe it includes some farmers and some restaurant owners that said, "You're killing us here. We can't get American citizens to do these jobs for these wages." And so he backed off or told immigration to back off enforcing in that particular arena. But immigration also has one of the most illegal things that law enforcement could ever have, quota system. And it's, something that we've been combating against for generations. And here it is flagrantly stated 3,000 people per day have to be arrested by ICE. That is scary because what we see as a result, how many times we read in the newspaper, Americans are being picked up, veterans are being picked up, they're being detained for weeks while they try to prove that they're Americans, only because they have Latino, descent or surname, and it is absolutely appalling and disgusting. So yeah, there's some groups out there benefiting from illegal immigration, but that's not the goal here. It's not to give anybody a benefit by illegal immigration. What we need is reform. We need a pathway to citizenship. We need to make sure that people do come in this country legally or face arrest, but not just wholesale. There should be some work done here. And regardless, they're entitled to a hearing. We
Mm-hmm.
must give it to them, not just send them off some other country and then they never get their hearing ever. And they're just detained in perpetuity. That to me is the worst.
So true, and I know it's important to me. I know it's important to you as a former prosecutor, a current civil rights attorney. The due process has to be applied to everyone, even those who may be here illegally or even suspected of being here illegally. I mean, I think that's something that we're in agreement on.
Yeah, and look at the most recent comments that Trump is so proud of his success with these deportations that he, I think it was about 3 weeks ago, stated that he was going to look into deporting some of Americans who have been convicted of crimes. How does that work? You're
That's
an American
that's
and you're going to get sent to another country that is grossly illegal. I haven't heard much more about it, but that plan's floating around out there. You have birthright citizenship that's being attacked. To what generation are we doing this? Because if we go all the way back to the beginning, then there's only one nation that should be here. That's First Nation people. The rest of us need to go. So it doesn't make sense that you would want to deport people who are who are have birthright citizenship without any kind of explanation as to how far back you're going to go, what would qualify someone to be subject to this. It's just like flying by the cuff and making a paper airplane out of our Constitution and see where it lands. It's absolutely disgusting.
you know, I have
Uh,
I have Trump supporting friends, some diehards who have said, illegal immigration is wrong, but we have to make legal immigration a somewhat easier process if we want to deter illegal people from doing this illegally. So I think that there are a lot of people in your district who might have voted for Trump that would definitely agree with your mentality on this issue.
Right, and that's part of it. The other part is, we're looking to fix the leak in the dam at the dam, right? We're not looking to see what the cause of this is. Why do we have so much coming to the dam? We need to go upriver a little bit, go back to the country, see what we can do that people don't want to come here. Can we encourage our partners who are looking to build abroad? Of course, we always want to encourage manufacturers to do it here in the United States. But if they're set to go abroad or they're set to go to some other country, how about we persuade them to build in one of these countries that are causing so many people to leave because of a lack of economic opportunities and of course safety. And what can we do to help those countries make it safer for people to stay there? I don't know the answer to these questions, but they're worth exploring. And we don't talk about it. We don't talk about partnering with NGOs to see what can they do in countries that we don't have agreements with to keep people home. And that's how we stop this flow. But giving people a reason to stay where they are, make it safer for them, give them some economic opportunities. And I'd rather invest these billions of dollars in doing that and stopping the flow of illegal immigration into the United States than what we're currently doing, which is costing us more money and destroying our reputation worldwide.
So since we spoke last, the president was convicted of a bunch of felonies. His nickname with a lot of people, including myself at times, was Felon 47. You're a former prosecutor. Do you see any elements to the president that you saw with some of the defendants in your courtroom?
Yeah, sure. Certainly, theft and lack of a proper legal term, flim flam artists. Donald Trump is a con man. He's proven. He's also a liar with the defamation case. It's proven. He's also a sexual predator, proven with respect to the civil litigation that he was found liable for. He's been accused of pedophilia, not once, but multiple times. Never judged as such, but certainly settled with quite a few people for a tremendous amount of money. To me, that's a lot of smoke. So there has to be some fire. I'm not going to go on a limb and say something that's not true, but he certainly has been accused of pedophilia. He's been accused of a close relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. It's highly suspicious that the Epstein files that he promised to release during the campaign now all of a sudden are not a priority for him, and he will do anything to get the country to talk about something else. And who does he turn to in his attacks? African Americans. He wanted to release all the Martin Luther King assassination investigation, and I can't remember the other prominent African American that he attacked by with his rhetoric, but it's nauseating. It's absolutely nauseating that this convict who's serving as the president of the United States, instead of serving as a president who has reformed and rebuild and can demonstrate that anyone can have an opportunity and aspiration to go to the highest office, should try to achieve. He moved from New York, his primary residence from New York to Florida, because he couldn't vote in New York. I mean, this guy who was in office who couldn't vote for himself anymore. I don't know the laws in Florida, but it's pretty insane that we have a guy who hasn't shown any kind of remorse, hasn't shown any attrition. He's just a contrition, excuse me, and he's just there, um, trying to perpetrate more. With this phone thing and sneaker thing, and he's doing things while he's in the White House. This is laughable in the history books, and it will be, but we're living this, and it's a bit of a nightmare.
Is this second term scarier than you anticipated prior to his being reelected?
100%. I'll be very, very frank with you. I had no real aspirations of running this election cycle. That is, I was looking to support somebody. I was hoping that we had somebody local who was going to step up and say, "Hey, I want to run a serious candidate," and I would have gotten behind her or him. But when they produced that um, that bill, I call it the big BS bill, and I'll keep it clean for your show. It just scared me to death.
Mhm.
The attack on Medicaid and SNAP and Medicare, um, really, let's just call it the attack on the poor. I ran an analysis that poor people will lose, lower income people will lose roughly $1,600 a year from their overall base, while rich people or wealthy people gain a tremendous amount more money in their base year over year. To me, that was enough, but I still wasn't convinced until I really got into the weeds on the Medicaid bill. And you say, well, why do you care? You're a lawyer, you're a retired cop, and all those wonderful things. Well, because I have a daughter who was a police officer and I'll make this story really short, who got critically ill, no fault of her own, just a rare fluke, a virus that 90% of the people, um, it clears up and all issues go away, and that other percentage, it unfortunately doesn't. So at 33 years of age, she had to have a heart transplant. And as a police officer, you can only be out for 1 year. So that year leading up, plus she couldn't work. So at that 1 year mark, she had to resign from her post. That in itself was traumatic. But then she couldn't afford Cobra. We certainly couldn't afford the Cobra for her. She's too old to go on our insurance. Plus, she lived on her own. So we had to um, get her on Medicaid. So why is that so important? Well, my daughter never not had someone advocating for her, whether it be with the hospitals or Medicaid or whatever she needed. It got to a point where there was a question whether or not Medicaid was going to cover the surgery, which was millions of dollars, 2.7 to be exact. So we went through the whole process. When they told us that it doesn't look like Medicaid is going to cover it, we came up with a plan. We're going to sell everything. We're going to do everything we can. We cannot have her come out the other side of the surgery with nearly $3 million in debt, because they didn't want to cover the surgery. But my wife, the next day, after we spent probably till about 4:30 in the morning trying to figure out everything we got to get rid of, she called Medicaid and she got on the phone with them, and she got on the phone with other people in Medicaid, and she got transferred, and she finally got somebody who could tell us that they would cover it because of the range from where she lived to the hospital or the nearest hospital. If she didn't have that, and I know my daughter, if she didn't have that, she wouldn't have taken on that debt, because she knows she would have no way to repay it. And for her, she wouldn't have had the surgery, and she eventually would have died. So when you hear people say people are going to die, come January 2026, take that story alone, but now take out the advocacy of family or the person's ability to advocate for themselves. My daughter now is an RN at a major hospital. My other daughter, my youngest, is also an RN at the hospital, and we have numerous conversations about patients who come in by themselves and they leave by themselves without one person ever visiting them. No family, no network, no support. If those people have something that's critical with Medicaid now, with all these new restrictions, if we don't have somebody to advocate because they got caught up in a bureaucratic nonsense of not being able to work 80 hours a month or volunteer because they're critically ill, like my daughter was, they don't have a chance. So that right there was the catalyst where I said, you know what? We got to figure this out and we got to fight against it. And the first thing we have to do is start exhibiting some leadership because, quite frankly, I haven't seen it. I haven't seen strong leadership come out of any of the houses in DC. We have to be strong. We have to make people aware, get people out in the streets to show. I have people push back against me and say, well, what's these protests really do? Protests are not a 1 day event. They're not a 1 week event. They take sometimes years, and we have history of the civil rights movement. We have history with women's suffrage. We have history with the coal miners in West Virginia, where we could show that it takes tremendous amount of time to achieve your stated goal, but you can do it if you are angry enough and you react on that anger in the ballot box. So I don't want people breaking windows. I don't want people turning over cars and setting police cars on fire. That's not what I'm about. What I am about is having your voice heard, and I want to do it with the largest numbers we can do as often as we could do. I want this process to start and not end until well after the elections, until we actually are able to make change to get enough Republicans out of the office or to bend them to the point where they listen to the people and start acting like they represent the people and not one person in the White House. That's the overarching goal, and that's leadership. And I will say again, leadership is the solution. And to me, we just don't have it. And I want to see it really. We have to push it up against the GOP, but our Democrats are not strong. They're not showing that they're strong. They're not showing that they're angry. And I need to hear from them. There's a handful that are exhibiting strength. It should be the other way around. It should be just a handful who are not, and most of them are. And I'm encouraging every single member, every single person seeking to advance into the House or Senate to stand up and get your supporters out in the street and let's start this process. Let's make this a movement, and let's make this movement last until we see real change.
Well, I've always said Republican voters need health care too, and there seems to be a huge disconnect between the Republican politicians and the Republican voters because a lot of the Republican voters did not like a lot of the aspects of the big bad bill. So I think Jeff Van Drew has let his community down. Your district, his district, if you want to call it his district, he's not really a representative, if you ask me, is the poorest district in New Jersey. So that was a huge betrayal.
Absolutely, right? You're losing SNAP benefits, Medicaid. You have the three poorest counties. You have 35,000 people living below the poverty rate in Atlantic County. I believe it's 8,000 in Salem County and somewhere in between in Cumberland. I'm sorry, Salem County 8,000, and I want to say 10 plus thousand in Cumberland County, below the poverty level. It is insane that Jeff Andrew hasn't spoken up against this bill every single day. And he could couch it any way he want. You know, he could do a Margie Taylor Greene where he does platitudes to the president and then says how much it sucks because she's also in a very poor district, or just flat out say it. This is terrible. When I agreed to support Donald Trump, I didn't know he was going to do this. I apologize to the voters in the second district, and I'm going to fight against this. Join me. Instead, he's hiding. We haven't heard a single word from him. And that speaks volumes. Silence speaks volumes when it comes to situations like this. So I'm going to set Jeff aside. You know, he's a weak person politically. And there's no reason trying to bait him or to encourage him. It's time for change. If he's tired, he needs to go rest. And let's help him. Let's help him get that rest. He doubled his net worth in the years that he was in Congress. Doubled it. So now it's time for him to take his loot and go off somewhere and just be happy. Yeah, and I think he has enough that he probably never has to practice dentistry again, but I don't know his finances, so I won't speak too harshly to that. But I know that he's not representing us. I know he's not exhibiting leadership, and that's why we are going to fight to do that.
Well, the fact that he's a dentist and he still voted to gut Medicaid, actually, I think is even worse because he knows what can happen when someone doesn't have proper insurance because a lot of indicators of poor health are dental.
Yeah, he's a dentist, so he's somewhat of a scientist. He knows what the impact of COVID was when he voted against that. So, he's not voting for the interests of people in his district. He's voting for the interests of one person, maybe two. That would be Jeff Van Drew and Donald Trump. And to me, that's deplorable. And I hope everybody listening to this interview will agree that significant change has to be made, and we have to start with this election next November, or November 26th, excuse me.
So you're a civil rights attorney, former police officer, former prosecutor. What do you bring? Because you have a couple of Democratic opponents in the primary. What do you? How would you distinguish yourself from your opponents, both on the Republican side and the Democratic side?
Well, I'm from here.
Yeah.
I've raised my family here. I didn't move here 4 months ago and said, you know what, I got a pocket full of cash. I'm going to run against Jeff Andrew. We danced that dance, by the way. We did it last cycle. That didn't work out too well for us. My opponent then spent almost $1 million to beat me by 400 votes. So, literally brought himself an election, not from here, not connected with the people, not knowing anybody here. And here we are again with another person, ironically, from the same area, coming into our district, pocket full of cash. Hey, I want to run and I want to represent you in the second district without knowing who we are. What is it that you're going to represent us on? You don't even know what our issues are, unless you read them somewhere. But I've been out since the first time I ran in 2022. I have not stopped working in the communities. It was my gateway into the communities to work with people. I ran in 2024. I have not stopped working with the communities. In fact, we've picked up as much more than we had in 2022, because I have that many more connections. All the counties, anybody, we knew that they could reach out to us if they needed help, and we went to all their events, as many as we can go to, and we tried to be supportive of every part of our district. So I'm very proud of what we've done. I'm very proud of the reputation we've created. And the significant difference between myself and the other candidates: one, I'm a very serious candidate, experienced at running. Two, I'm from here. I
Yes.
know Cumberland County. I went to high school there. I met my wife there. I had my first two children there. I know Salem County. My wife's from there. She grew up there. We have a lot of crossover there. I know Atlantic County. I've been here since 1991 or 92, excuse me. No, 91. That's a long time in the community. So I know it very well. I've never lived in Ocean, Gloucester, or Cape May, but I could tell you I know enough people there that I know what's primary interest to them. And we're not stopping. We're meeting with farmers to talk about what we can do moving forward. Even though I ran last two times on economic opportunity and uh, infrastructure building out in our district, I stand by those goals. I don't think they're attainable. I won't say to a potential voter, I'm going to go to Congress and I'm going to do this, and this on my first year. It's a lie, right? Because unless we take back the House, we're not going to accomplish anything. And I have to go with the assumption that I'm going to win, but I can't guarantee enough wins that we're going to take over the House. It's likely, but I don't know. So I'm not running on those promises. I have them in my book. I have a big issues book here, with a lot of things that we can accomplish and a means to pay for them. Because I don't think you should propose anything unless you could pay for it. But I'm not going to talk about that until we get over this nightmare that we're living with, that is being Donald Trump. Hopefully, that is in 2026, we put the brakes to everything because we have control of the House. Hopefully, and then that starts slowing down the destruction that he has created. And if we stay in those streets and we continue to protest against the things that he stands for, in 2028, we take back the White House and preferably the Senate. And now we have an opportunity to follow the vision of rebuilding and rebranding. And that's what I hope to do. So I'm very realistic, and I'm not ever going to stand up in front of a crowd in this election cycle and tell you all the wonderful things I want to get done, because I it's not going to happen this cycle. I just want to get in there and stop this shenanigans. And then once we get control, we could go back to talking about the things that we need to accomplish, such as money for paving our roads. I could point to examples all over the district, how much more money we need just to improve our infrastructure, improve our grid. We need more electricity with these um, AI farms, data mining farms. We need more electricity. And we have to find ways that's palpable for everybody to build out our electrical grid. Those things are a priority for me. I think we're just putting in a new data center in Cumberland County. It's under construction right now. And the first thing I asked is, well, where are we getting electricity from? Because I met with developers the last time I ran, and I wanted them to pledge some projects in Salem County. And they said, great, where are we going to get the electricity? So what are you talking about? We got a plant right there. And they said, well, that money gets sold. I'm sorry, that electricity gets sold on the open market. We need some here. So we might need to work with our state partners to get some legislation to keep some electricity local, so we could develop our infrastructure. We could develop economic opportunities. These things are very attainable goals, but the first thing we have to do is stop this regime. Stop this regime. Stop the policies and fight back and figure out if we could parse out pieces of this big BS bill that we could reverse with smaller bills. That's my goal, is to come up with, if I can't come up with things to change it for the whole country, then, pork's back. Maybe I could change it for our district where we're not affected by the Medicaid cuts. We're not affected by the SNAP cuts. We need that help. And there's a way to get that done uh, if we have to go to plan B. So there's the plan. The plan is to stop and then restore and rebuild.
You're so right. And, I have never lived, I've lived 5 minutes away from the district, in Donald Norcross's district. I'm not trying to be arrogant when I say this, but I know who your opponent is. I know where he's coming from. I feel like I know your district better than he does. And I've never lived there. I've spent a few nights there, but I've never, resided there.
Yeah, I mean, and you don't have to live in every aspect of this district,
Right.
but it helps if you lived in some parts of it to get a feeling. Living in Vineland, knowing the benefits that my mother received to build a home for us in Vineland, and then was a hand up where she went to a housing program that allowed her 5 years. They saved part of her rent for 5 years for a mortgage down payment, and all she had to do was qualify for it, and she did. And she owned that house until she retired and moved to Georgia. And the things that she did to make that house better and to make it her own and make her community look better, it's a remarkable story. And so those are the type of programs I like to see us restore. But what we have right now, we have a program that says if you don't move out of public housing in 2 years, you're out. You're going to be out anyway. We're going to evict you. And we don't even know when that starts. Does it start when the bill was passed? Does it start in January? Or does it start in some other arbitrary date? We don't even know. So the reality is that instead of helping people, we are harming people. And who are we harming? The lowest income earners that we have. And that is really, really the disgusting part, that very wealthy people have written these brutally mean bills. It's particularly the big BS bill that is going to hurt so many people.
It's really frustrating. And I think that you have your finger on the pulse. You are a straightforward person with a vision. And I think that you have the experience. So, I mean, I can only speak for myself, but the Blue Dog Whisperer endorses you for this election. And do you have a website or any Instagram handles or anything that my listeners or viewers can check you out on?
Yes, please go to Tim Alexander for Congress, but this time we changed the four to the number four just to save a couple of characters.
Mhm.
Number four, Tim Alexander for Congress.com. Read where I stand on the issues, read what our plan is, then join us. We're going to have a page that you can sign up and volunteer and show up and help us achieve one, the voice against the tyranny that we're dealing with, and two, to get into the office. From that page, you can go and make a donation. Folks, every amount is welcome. There's no such thing as, oh, I can't make a donation of thousands of dollars, but you can make a donation to make it because it's appreciative. And you don't have to live in a district to support us. If you're watching this from somewhere far and you're thinking, well, I don't live there, well, you can still help us. And we're asking for that help because we need that help. We, not just me personally, but our district. I represent this second congressional district New Jersey, and I feel as like I speak for everybody that we need help here, and we want you to support this campaign to help us get that help. So please come join us. We're gonna probably not going to go back on X. I think I'm going to go on Blue Sky. We haven't set that up yet, but once our media people start ramping up, you'll see more of that. There's a really a note that I wrote to my law enforcement brethren in ICE. And it's an article that I've written that it'll be accessible through the website in the coming days. I would encourage you to read it. You can understand some of the concerns and quite honestly, bad policy that the immigration department is exercising to meet quotas, which every kind of quota in law enforcement is illegal. And it's going to cost us even more money with litigation. Instead of being smart here, we're burning down a house to try to achieve an unattainable goal here. So again, join me, support, volunteer, and let's win this election and let's take back this seat. And then the real work begins. But we continue to have a voice in opposition until we get what we deserve. I'll end with this. New Jersey is a donor state, meaning that we pay more taxes than we get back from the federal government. Come January 2026, that number gets even bigger. That we are paying all this money and we don't get anything back for it. When we need people to come into Atlantic City, one of our economic hubs, they shouldn't be worried about tearing up their tires because the roads are full of potholes. They should be driving on all paved roads, always in, always out. So that's just a small sample of some of the things we want to accomplish. But we have to get in the office and we have to build from there. So with that, I thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you. Tim Alexander for Congress. Check him out online. Thank you.
Thanks, Evan.